Hi, I'm Kevin Ioli of Yahoo Sports, and you're watching The Shadows Project. Good morning.
Hi, Kevin. Good
How are
morning.
you?
I'm good, man. Thank you very much for doing this.
You
Yeah,
betcha.
I've got your pictures behind me. Hall of Fame boxing, writer. So happy you've come on the show and that. I won't take up too much of your time because I'm guessing you're quite busy today with the Fury Wilder fight.
Yeah, I'm good now. Later on in the day, I'll be really hopping, but I'm good now. So we're all set. No problem.
Yeah, yeah. So it'll be like what time will it be? Oh, it'll be like 10 o'clock US time. Yeah. So
Um,
I've started on the Guinness, so till 5 o'clock in the morning. So maybe it'll be 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning here. The first thing I want to do is just talk about the Fury and the Wilder fight, and just what you think, and then move on to some of your achievements in the sport. In the writing world. Yeah. So what's your thoughts on tonight? Who do you think's going to win, etc., and the game plans and that?
Sure. I believe Fury's going to win the fight. I mean, I think if you look at the first two fights they fought, basically 19 rounds, 18 of them were scored. Fury won the majority of those rounds. And the two fights were totally different fights, and Fury won in two different ways. The fact that Wilder came in a lot heavier and looked like he was bulked up, suggests to me that he doesn't want to get backed up. He doesn't want Fury running over him. So he tried to get some strength so that if, Fury leaned on him, he could push him off and get some punching room. So I think that will make it a different fight than the last time. But I still think Fury is the better boxer. I think Malik Scott is saying and doing a lot of the right things for Wilder. And I believe, he'll make somewhat of a difference. But the concern that I have if I'm on Malik Scott or on Wilder's team is that, this is the first time Deontay's going to try to fight this way. And, against Fury, you're going against the best boxing big man there is. And Wilder's going to be trying something new. It's still going to come down to his power. Could he win and knock Fury out? Of course he could. He knocked him down nearly out in the first fight. And he has that power. If he hits you, I just think Fury is so on point and understands and will see the punches coming that he'll be able to survive that. So I like Fury by decision.
Yeah, I think that's like the general consensus. Yeah, it's like Wilder can land a bomb. He's always got that potential, but Fury's got that ability to box on the back foot and moving forward. So it's difficult to see a way where he could win. And lots of people are saying like Fury might be complacent. That could be his biggest enemy. Like, when he's fought weaker guys, not so strong opposition, he's looked bad. So is he considering Wilder to be quite weak based on the last fight? I think you've spoken to him recently, yeah? I watched an interview with him, yeah.
I don't, there is such animosity between them, and Fury really does not like him. And so I don't see him not being totally focused, not being ready. If Wilder catches him, it's just the fact that, hey, you got to think the other guy's good too, right? And Wilder is a big dude who has a big punch, and he's pretty athletic. Now he doesn't have some of the other things that Fury has, but I think if he's able to, kind of get that one shot in, which he's done in the past, he's done that in the first fight, that he has the ability. But Fury, I think, is ready. And he has the ability to mix it up, in my opinion. And I think when you see that, a guy that can fight in more than one way, if plan A is not working, he can revert to a plan B. Wilder doesn't really have a lot to go to. Wilder's thing is going to be the same thing all the time. And I think that's going to ultimately be the downfall. At the top level, you have to make adjustments, you have to make changes. And I don't see, Wilder being able to match Fury in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it like 2 weeks ago with Joshua. Now everybody's saying Joshua boxed the wrong fight, yeah. And what he needs to do in the rematch is, walk forward and throw bombs and try and knock him out. But I believe he adopted that strategy because he knows that he would gas. And who would say he could knock, Usyk out? You know what I mean? Really, it didn't. I mean, obviously in the fight it didn't look like it, but I believe he doesn't trust his engine, Anthony Joshua. And maybe his chin even after the Ruiz fight. So I think it's similar to this now, going into the rematch with Usyk and Joshua, like in this fight where if someone can box on the back foot and box moving forward, it's like, what do you beat them with? Power. That's all really. What would be your thoughts on, like, this comparison, for the rematch for Joshua and Usyk?
I didn't think Joshua fought big, right? I think that, he needed to fight a big man's fight, in my opinion. And, I mean, hey, Usyk is a big man at 6'3", 220, but when compared to Anthony, he doesn't look big. Usyk is basically the size of Muhammad Ali during Ali's prime, and we don't think about that. But, like I had written something before the fight, and I said this a number of times. I said, if I had not seen Usyk fight Chaz Witherspoon, I would have picked him 100 out of 100 to beat Anthony Joshua.
I think I read that also. I read that you wrote that you said that.
I knew his boxing was so good, but I did see him fight Chaz Witherspoon, and I didn't like the way he looked, and it seemed to me like the size and the reach were causing him trouble. So given that, I went with AJ, but in the third or fourth round of the fight, you knew AJ was in big trouble because he trying to fight Usyk's fight instead of fighting his own fight. I don't think he has to revert to a slugger, but I think he has to fight like a big, powerful man and, be, what they call a boxer puncher. And I don't think he did that. And so he played away from his strengths and he played into Usyk's strengths. I think it's going to be tough. What I believe should happen is not that McCracken should be replaced, but they should bring another voice in to take a look at AJ. And here's why I say that. Think about I think it was after the 11th round going into the 12th, and he said, you need to box him, move. Like, no, at that point, you needed to tell him, you need to knock his ass out. You don't need to be, moving and whatnot. And he got the wrong advice. And I think that Anthony would benefit like so many fighters did, like Vladimir Klitschko did, like Lennox Lewis did from, they got Emmanuel Stewart in their camp. And Emmanuel was able, he completely took over. In some cases, guys go in and they're supplementing the existing trainer. I think, AJ would benefit from another voice in the corner, another thought process, because he has all
like a Teddy Atlas speech. Yeah. No.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, if Teddy Atlas smack him in the face, now get yourself out there and go. That's what he needed. I think at that point he needed to go out there and say, okay, I got to finish this fight. No, I'm not going to box him in the 12th round when I'm way behind. It was bad. And I just think, I think Rob is a good trainer. He's done a great job with the Olympic program there. But I think that, maybe he's comfortable with what AJ is, and AJ needs to change a little bit. And so I think that, adding another voice would make a big difference for him.
What's what like Ben Davidson said though, and he said that maybe Rob knows something about like Joshua, you know what I mean? That like his vulnerabilities. So people were saying like, why is he cheering him in the corner, saying good work and all this? But maybe he's got this like lack of confidence, and since the Ruiz defeat, he hasn't looked good, Or in the Kubrat Pulev fight. I don't think he looked amazing because Kubrat wasn't really there as an opponent, and the rematch, I don't think he looked. I think Ruiz was just massive. So
it was too slow. Yeah.
So like, a coach who's with them in the training camp all the way through knows their vulnerabilities. So maybe if he'd have gone hell for leather, he would have just got knocked out. You know what I mean? Because you saw in the final seconds of the fight, he was on the ropes, and there's that 5-second thing where they say they rang the bell early, and maybe Rob knew this. He hasn't got the engine or whatever.
I think I don't think you can handle him. You're talking about a world-class guy, and you can't be afraid, right? And and worry. This might you have to think of the good things. And I agree. Hey, McCracken knows AJ better than you or I or anybody else, right? I agree with that. And I'm not down on McCracken. I think he's a smart boxing guy, and he knows his guy, and he knows his stuff. I just think, that sometimes you're together, it's just like in any other sport, soccer or, baseball or whatever it might be, sometimes the message doesn't, get through like it used to get through. You're together so long and that, it kind of gets stale. And I just think, somebody who looks at things a little differently and maybe even just says the same thing, but in a different word, in a different manner, and gets the message through differently, I think would benefit him. And so I think, you add somebody, because I think Anthony still is capable of being, a star. He's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. I totally agree with you. The Ruiz rematch, he sunk up the joint, and he's lucky that Ruiz was so fat. But, I think he would benefit from just being invigorated by having somebody else in his corner and kind of helping Rob and working with Rob and kind of pushing the buttons a little differently.
Mm-hmm. So after 2 rematches, then you'd say tonight's one with Wilder, the third fight, is more of a foregone conclusion than the other fight, than AJ's fight?
I would never.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, and next time
I never want to say this is boxing, and they in the old days, when I was a kid growing up, when the ring announcer would say the fight, they would say 15 rounds or less. They don't say that anymore. But you remember, that's important. The fight tonight is 12 rounds or less, and so I don't ever want to say it's a foregone conclusion, because one guy's 240 pounds, the other guy's almost 280 pounds. They're both big punchers, so nothing is a foregone conclusion in heavyweight boxing. But I think that Fury is almost a 3-1 favorite, and to me, that's a deserved number. That is a really good. Should it be 2.5 to 1? Should it be 3.5 to 1? Maybe you can make an argument on the other side, but a 3-1 number is just about perfect. And I think the odds makers hit it on that one. Yeah.
So are you going for like mid to late rounds, like most people are thinking for Fury?
I'm taking decision by, and I said that before. And the reason I am is because I think Wilder has made enough adjustments that he will be able to, he got trucked in that second fight. It's like Fury was fighting downhill and just, like a Mack truck rolling over some small car. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think Wilder will be able to stand his ground a little bit better. And as a result, I don't think he's going to catch those big shots from a distance like he did in the second fight. I still think Fury's going to outbox him. I think Fury will hurt him. I just think that Wilder will be able to make it to the finish line this time.
Mm-hmm. You know what I hate nowadays, Kevin, when you have like these fighters and like, say, imagine like Deontay Wilder loses tonight and people say, oh, it's over for them. Yeah. And then if you look back at the past, you had fighters like Ken Norton or other fighters like this. I mean, I think Ken Norton won 2 of the 3 Ali fights. They were very tight, and in the past it didn't matter so much. But now it seems if they lose 2 fights, then he definitely, for example, Wilder could definitely not beat AJ for because he's lost to Fury. And this kind of infuriates me about boxing, which is different with MMA, because I see that you cover MMA, and they, lots of them have multiple losses, but they keep fighting. And this is like old day boxing, but nowadays it's like people just write them off if they lose 2 fights, like Styles make fights in my opinion. So what do you think about this?
I think that's the ignorance of the fan base. And I think what it is, to a large degree, more so in the United States and in other places, boxing has dropped in prestige and in interest. And so there's not as many knowledgeable boxing fans as there used to be. People who understand the sport know that that's not true. And, and that, like you said, Styles make fights, and that, one loss does not prevent you from coming back and winning down the road. I mean, think about this. Muhammad Ali beat Sonny Liston for the title in 1964. Then gets stripped in 1967, and he wins it back in 1974, right? Beats George Foreman 10 years apart, it can happen. And so, I think, we have a lot of really fun heavyweights. We have a lot of fun fights that can be made. Think about some of the fights that you can make, that in the heavyweight division nowadays. And, I think it's a good time to be a fan of heavyweight boxing. And you start at the top, with Usyk and Andy Ruiz and AJ and Deontay and Tyson and Adam Kalnaki's on the card tonight. He's a fun guy, and you have Jared Big Baby Anderson, who's been Tyson's sparring partner, coming up, and he looks like he's going to be a factor. I think that Joyce, obviously a big hard punching guy. A lot of guys, you still can't forget Dillian White. I think is a factor in the division. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that we can have a lot of really good fights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you okay for time?
I'm just getting a text. Yeah, so I'm just afraid somebody's going to call me, but I'm fine. Go ahead.
If you need to leave and speak to Bob Arum or something, I understand. So there's boxing in my city tonight in Liverpool. Yeah, Liam Smith versus Anthony Fowler. Do you know anything about these guys? Or
yeah. I mean, I haven't paid attention to the buildup of the fight, obviously, because I've been working on the Fury Wilder fight, but I think this is an interesting fight. I don't know what the number is on the fight, but I personally kind of lean towards Smith in the fight, and I'm one of them. I might be one of the few people that feel that way, but I kind of lean towards Smith in the fight. I think it's a critical fight for him. There's no doubt about that. He needs to come up with a win. And the Smith brothers have done pretty good, except in like the really big fights.
Against Ward and that. Yeah. I mean, who does good against Ward? and Canelo. I was speaking to Jeremy Hedges 2 weeks ago, just before the Joshua fight. And I asked him a similar question. He's a great boxing reporter, future Hall of Fame boxing writer. I'll bill him as, he's got a great channel and that. But I asked him the same question. I said, like, when you're speaking to these fighters, when you speak to Fury and Wilder, and is it difficult to kind of like stay impartial and not get too derogatory about one fighter or another, when you're writing about them? Because I've seen that you're not like afraid to say your opinion. In MMA, you'll probably know what I'm talking about, and you'll say your opinion about this. But do you feel, is it difficult for you, or do you just write what you think, or no?
I've been doing it a long time, right? I've been covering fights. I was still in college, and I got a full-time job at a newspaper while I was still in college. And I loved the fights, and nobody was covering boxing. So I said, "Do you mind if I cover some of these fights?" And they had a monthly fight card where I was, and it was small fights. And then I lived in Pittsburgh. There was a heavyweight title fight in Pittsburgh. Larry Holmes fought Ronaldo Snipes. That was the first major fight that I covered. So I've been doing, that's 40 years ago, right? So I've been doing it a long time. And I think that, as a result, I think what the fans want, I try to look at two things. Number one, I want to give the fans something different than just X's and O's, because everybody's going to talk about that, right? I want, what's their mental state? What's their life story? What's going on? And, what is, for instance, Tyson, the obvious thing is, his, mental health problems and how it manifests itself. But there's so many things about him that are interesting. So I want to try to, get, that aspect of them out. But, if we're in a fight like this where, Wilder and Fury, everybody knows them, everybody knows, kind of their backstory and everything. I think at that point, what's getting to them, and kind of play amateur psychologist. And, hey, I've covered it a long time, and I'm not a trainer, and I'm not but I know and understand boxing. And so I feel like I can ask them questions, and I want to bring out their knowledge and their passion and what they're doing. And I think if I can get that across to my readers, it's a big win for me.
Yeah. I mean, like some of the people behind one of my favorite fighters ever, Duran. Yeah, I think like for me, he's probably the greatest boxer of all time. Yeah, Leonard Cotto. He's another one of the modern era. He was my favorite fighter in the last 20 years or so. So that's why I've put these pictures up. And there's you behind. This is when you were collecting your trophy for Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. That's Rich Murata, who I'm with there, who's the president of the Hall of Fame, and it's really it was a great honor that night, and I laughed, because I said, hey, I'm getting in the same Hall of Fame as Floyd Mayweather and Muhammad Ali, and it's like that's a little crazy.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Did you do any boxing yourself, or you just
I mean,
liked it? Like,
I never, I fought, like when we were kids, we fooled around in the backyard and everything, and I always had a bloody nose,
yeah,
but I never actually in a formal setting. No.
yeah. Have you ever had like any animosity from the fighters? Like I've watched journalists speaking to like Mike Tyson back in the day, and that, and obviously he was a bit moody with some of them and quite aggressive. Have you ever experienced any of this yourself, or are they generally quite good?
The other day with Wilder, he wouldn't talk to me. He was mad
Okay.
because I had written about the costume, and he had said he had worn the costume, and so he was mad. So he wouldn't speak to me the other day. I actually had, after the Tyson fight, when he bit Holyfield. Now Tyson and I have a great relationship. We get along really well, and we've known each other for an awful long time. But he got mad at me after the Holyfield fight, because I inadvertently said to him, like, you can't bite him. I said, what happened? What went wrong? And he goes, did you watch the fight? He was headbutting me and he was yelling at me. And so just instinctively I said, yeah, but you can't bite him. And then he kind of like, so I had that with Mike. And actually I have a video on YouTube where I interviewed Mike last year, and we talked about this. And this is one of my favorite stories that I like to tell about Tyson. I had written a thing about him, and I had praised him, saying, "Oh, hey, I like kind of he's changing his life, and he's not getting into trouble. And if he focuses on boxing, this could be a really good thing." And so the next day, I get a call. Don't recognize the number, and the guy says, "Kevin, this is Mike Tyson." I'm going like, I said, "This is like the worst Mike Tyson impersonation I've ever heard." And I said, "Good, thanks for calling, Mike." Click, and I hang up. And it turns out it was Mike. And so I saw him 2 days later I was at his gym, and he goes, "I called you to be nice, and you hung up on me." And I went, and so we had I thought it was somebody making fun of me and playing phony Tyson. So I've had a number of crazy things happen over the years.
So who of these fighters are you like closest to? I mean, so I saw your interview with Masvidal and MMA fighters and boxers. Who have you like created the best relationships with?
I would say one of the people that's on the screen there, Sugar Ray Leonard. Have always been really good, with Sugar Ray Leonard. Quite a few MMA fighters, Uriah Faber, I think would come to mind. Max Holloway in the UFC, just a fantastic guy. Really always been good. I'm up and down with Oscar De La Hoya. Like we have a great relationship, but when Oscar kind of gets sensitive when he gets in trouble, if he's drinking or whatever, and then he doesn't like criticism. But so we go up and down a lot. I would say I have a great relationship with Gennady Golovkin. For quite a long time. Hasim Rahman, the former heavyweight champion.
Oh yeah.
Vitaly Klitschko more so than Vladimir. Not that I had a bad thing with Vitaly with Vladimir. I think we were good, but I think I would say I was closer with Vitaly than Vladimir.
Yeah. I mean, I love Oscar De La Hoya. I know he gets some stick online, but for me, he's obviously an amazing fighter and that. But he's just a bit wild, isn't he? So. I think
there was so much pressure on him in his life that I think what we see is kind of this reaction to that pressure. It's his release valve, and unfortunately it's his release is dangerous, drinking and whatnot, and so that can be difficult. But I think in his heart, Oscar is a good guy. I mean, he's done some things that I'm sure he's not proud of, but I like Oscar, and I always will. As I said, we've had our ups and downs, and there's been times he's been mad at me. There was one fight that he put me in the last row of the media section, right? Because he was mad at me, and but it is what it is, and
I saw him dissing Eddie Hearn last week, taking the piss out of Eddie Hearn, and so that made me like him even more, because I don't like Eddie Hearn, I just think he's very, obviously promoters need to be egotistical, but there's like limits to that ego, and Eddie just goes over the limit for me. Bob Adams is just the right level of egotistic.
So you like Bob Adams thing with Mike Coppinger the other day?
Yeah. I liked it when he was going mad about that girl on stage and all that. Yeah, he was like swearing. Yeah, he's good. So what? So do you know Bob on like a personal level, or you just?
Oh, I've known Bob for 35 years. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and you talk about ups and downs, I mean, but the thing is, Bob and I have always liked each other. And, sometimes you get, but I've gone to lunch with Bob. When Bob's son died, I was at his home, with him. Bob is a good guy. I've seen Bob do a number of amazing things. There was a sports writer, and he's passed now. He died in 2005. And he was toward the end of his life, and he died at 80 years old. So he might've been 77, 78. And, he didn't really have anything else to do. And so he was kind of, losing it a little bit. So a couple small websites gave him jobs, but just to, pay, give him a couple of bucks, but he didn't have enough to get by. And he had a lot of bills, and he was going to get evicted from his place. And we had a fundraiser